Stumps and Stories podcast with Nishad Pai Vaidya.
So one of the things we love doing on this podcast is bringing to you journeys, fascinating journeys of people who have excelled on the field of play, but have also done exceptionally well off it. Now, today joining us is someone who brought a smile to our face with everything that he did on the field and got us even more joy when he embarked on a different career off the field. Now, here's a guy who was bowling fast. He was a left-arm fast bowler, made one of the quirkiest debuts in Test cricket that you would imagine, had quite a long career on the field, and then once he gave up the game, decided to become a TV presenter and excelled in a career that was nearly 30 years long. Joining me is Mike. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us. So, Mike, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Nishad. Lovely to be here. Yeah, it's been an amazing journey, Nish. It's sort of, I'll be 65 soon, and I'm thinking about maybe not wanting to do television and stuff like that, but still be involved with the cricket. But it's been, look, when you're growing up, here in Australia, it was rugby league, cricket, a little bit of rugby union. But to think of representing your country, I mean, it was like everybody's dream. And then to do it. And I think the last few years I've started to reflect a bit on the cricket career. The people I played with and against alone. I mean, I think about playing against Sachin and I just go, really? I played against Sachin and Kapil Dev and Azhar and all the English guys and all the West Indians and Viv and it's just crazy to think that I got to do that. I'm very humbled by it all now, let me tell you.
But then when you started off at Randwick Cricket Club as a young boy, what were your hopes or what were your dreams? Did you really dream of bagging the baggy green, or was it something else? Was it a bit like play all sports and just see where it goes?
It was a bit like that, play all sports. My greatest love was rugby league, and I really wanted to play. The local club around here that we all support is the South Sydney Rabbitohs, and they play in the big league in the NRL. And those guys were our heroes growing up. But in the summer, because there wasn't as many sports available, where I grew up, you played rugby league or rugby union in the winter, cricket in the summer, or you went down the beach and went surfing. There was not the multitude of sports that kids can pick now. So we played cricket in the summer to sort of fill in Saturday afternoon after we'd been surfing down the beach in the morning. But I'd been getting a few wickets in this junior competition, and the people at Randwick had heard that there was this, curly-haired, left-arm maniac running in on the concrete, bowling really quick and bouncing a few sort of older guys that had played great cricket. And the secretary in 1976, a guy called Lyle Gardner, started ringing my house at Matraville and asking my mother, would you send him down to training? And I kept going, no, it's big commitment. You've got to train 2 times a week. I want to go surfing. I want to play rugby league. Anyway, he rang one Saturday morning at the start of the 1976-77 season. It was about the 3rd or 4th game of the year. And he said, a bowler has dropped out of a 4th grade game, and would Michael go up to Snake Park, which was only 10 minutes up the road from my place, and play for us? And my mother hung the phone up and she said, you won't be going surfing today. You'll be going to play. That man will not ring this house again and ask you to play. You will go and play. I didn't have long whites and I didn't have any spikes. So I borrowed a pair of long whites off the only bloke I knew that had them, and they bought a bag of spikes to the ground and a pair fitted me. And I took 4 for 16 playing this 4th grade game on turf. And that day changed my whole life. I thought, I still wanted to play rugby league, but just to play on turf with spikes and long trousers, it was like so official and so proper. And I ran in and bowled a few bounces and got 4 for 16. And I thought, I want to do this too. So that started my grade career with Randwick and never looked back.
Of course, that was the era of Jeff Thomson, Dennis Lillee, and just bowling that spell as a young man. Did that bring that thrill that, I could do something like what these guys are doing for Australia?
They were heroes. I mean, when I think back now, I had posters of those guys, Rod Marsh, the Chappell brothers, on my wall. And they were so inspirational. They were so fast. Jeff Thomson. Look, everybody saw Mark Wood bowl all day the other day at 95 miles an hour. it's hard to keep doing that. But Jeff Thomson bowled that quick all the time. And Lillee they were heroes. So, yeah, you start to think, oh, love to play Test cricket, but I got to play first grade first. And then I got to get in the New South Wales team after that. And then you look at the people who were playing for New South Wales at that time was Len Pascoe and Gary Gilmore and Jeff Lawson and these bowlers that were just, how do you get in? But you work your way up the grades and you pick up, train harder, work on your skill, all this sort of stuff. And, yeah, within like 4 seasons, I was in the New South Wales squad playing first grade and rubbing shoulders with Doug Walters, who was my hero. I had a poster of him on the wall.
You made your debut against Queensland, which had Greg Chappell, Alan Border, and some of the big names of Australian cricket. What was that like, walking into your first-class debut and going up against these absolute champions of Australian cricket?
Again, it was the old Gabba, had a dog track around it. And in my team was Rick McCosker, John Dyson, Peter Toohey, Graham Beard, Steve Rickson, Trevor Chappell, I think, Henry, Len Pascoe. I mean, these guys had all played Test cricket, some World Series cricket. And Doug Walters, my hero. I sat next to him in the dressing room. It was just amazing. And that first season, in those days, we only played 9 Sheffield Shield games because Tasmania wasn't a full member of the Shield. You only played them once instead of twice. So out of those 9 games, I played 4 and I was 12th man for the other 5. So I really got to, because they hung on to me as 12th man, you learn a lot by being in the dressing room in those early days.
Very soon, just after your first season, you were up in England during the Botham's Ashes. And of course, it was a series that captured the imagination of the cricket world, and you were playing club cricket. And then suddenly you get a call from the Australian team manager saying, you know what, mate, you're up. You're going to be winning the baggy green. And of course, you just bowled 1 ball. Then there was rain. Then you came back on, got David Garr out. Tell us the whole sequence of events, because it's one of those debuts that, of course, a debut is a dream, but this isn't something that you would have dreamt of.
I didn't realise at the time, but no one had ever been picked for Australia while Australia was in another country, and that person was also playing in another country. So that was a first. But look, I'll just take you back to the season before. Some of the guys that I was playing first grade at Randwick with went over and played some cricket in the Northern League in Lancashire for Fleetwood and Preston and a few of those clubs, and said they'd had a great time, and said that this club, Fleetwood, was looking for a pro. So got in contact with them, said happy to come over and play this season in England. I just had my first class season with New South Wales. Thought it was good to go and back that up with a back-to-back season, then come back to Australia. So I was playing for Fleetwood, and then I got a phone call from a mate of mine from Newcastle, who was also in the New South Wales team, a guy called Greg Geese. He was on a scholarship at Gloucestershire, and he said that Mike Proctor and Brian Brain, who was a fabulous seaman, took thousands of wickets for Gloucester, had both broken down, and they were looking for a fast bowler to fill in. So I talked to the chairman at Fleetwood, and he said, look, you still got to play for us. If we're playing Saturday, Sunday, you can't play. But if a 3-day game is midweek, or they've got a Sunday 1-day game on, a Sunday league game, you can go and play. So I went down there, had a trial, signed up for Gloucester, played against Sri Lanka, Worcester, and a couple of 1-day games. They were John Player League 60-over matches in those days. And the Australian team were watching this on the TV, and I got a couple of wickets. So I'm at Cheltenham playing against Hampshire. Malcolm Marshall's running in, bowling 1,000 miles an hour. We were 3 or 4 down. I was batting 11, and everyone had the pads on.
Everyone?
I was he was bowling that fast. Everyone had the pads on. So the room attendant come out and said, oh, Mr. Whitney, there's a phone call, and picked the phone up. And this really Aussie voice said, you're being picked in the Australian cricket team, so you better leave the ground now. And I thought it was a mate of mine because there'd been a bit of press about Henry and Hoggy being injured. So I said to the bloke, I won't say what I said to the bloke on the phone, and just hung up. I thought it was a mate of mine, June up. The phone rang back a couple of minutes ago, and it was Fred Bennett. He was the chairman of New South Wales Cricket, the chairman of the Sydney Cricket, the loveliest human being, and manager of the Australian team. He went, Mike, it's bloody Fred Bennett. I went, oh, I just told him to He said, get in your car now. You've been exempt from this game. Drive up to Manchester to the Grand Hotel, and I'll meet you in room 327 as soon as you get there. So if you ask me about the drive from Cheltenham to Manchester, I can't actually remember anything about it. And it was a couple of hours. There's nothing in my memory about actually driving up there. But I get to the hotel, concierge, up to this room, knock on the door. There's Fred. Oh, sorry about swearing at your Fred on the phone. He went, and Kim Hughes is sitting on the bed there. And I'd only met Kim twice at that stage. I went, he went, just Kim. I went, Wit. And then he said, you're going to play in the team tomorrow. You've been picked in the 11. So that was like, boom. Okay. Am I here? Am I hearing and absorbing what you're saying? I said, I thought no, we've got enough people to carry the drinks, mate. We're going to take 3 quicks into the game and you're going to bowl first change after Dennis Lillee and Terry Alderman had opened the bowling. I mean, that moment, you're in shock. You don't, and at the same time, because now you get presented your baggy green cap on the ground. At the same time, we're in the manager's room and Fred Bennett's in these cardboard boxes going, there's your long sleeve jumper. There's your short sleever. There's your baggy green. Put it on. Got all my gear, go up to the room. We'll have a press conference in 2 hours to announce it to the press. So I go up to the room. I've got this room key. I walk in. It's all this gear. Because we had to room together in those days. Look at this beautifully crafted leather port sitting in the corner, and embossed in gold letters on top is D.K. Lillee.
Wow.
And because they didn't say that who I was rooming with. Dennis came in about 10 minutes later and I stood to attention like a school kid. I didn't know what to do. And he went, settle down. I'd only met him once. Oh, it was like a god had walked in the room, and this is one of our heroes. So I roomed with him for my first test. He was so fantastic. He said things like, look at the emblem on your jumper. When you're on the ground, just remember what you're doing and who you're playing for. And we'll support you. We've got your back. Which helped. We bowled the next morning. It was just bizarre. The next morning we're at the ground. Toss, we're bowling. Run out.
And how comforting was it that someone of the stature of Dennis Lillee telling you, you know what, just do your bit and we'll be supporting you? I'm sure it would have been huge.
Every time I see him, which is rarely now, I thank him for looking after me in Manchester. I give him a hug and say, thanks for looking after me in that first game, mate, because, mate, that was my 7th first-class game. I didn't know anything about first-class cricket or etiquette, or do I sit there or there, and what do I do? And I was a genuine kindergarten cricketer still, with a bit of get up and go, who'd made a bit of impression, but I really didn't know a lot about the game. So I learned so much. I mean, that was the Australian team. In the opposition, there was Boycott and Gower and Gooch and Gadding and Alan Knott and Bob Willis and Beefy, all these other legends that I'd read about and heard about. Next minute, you're out there. And that first morning, the clouds, I could have reached up and touched them. It was a typical Manchester morning. And the opening spells were bowled. And then I get from Kim, oh, here it comes. Oh, I'm going to bowl. He put his arm around me and said, good luck, mate. And I run in and bowl this first ball to Chris Tavarone. He sort of bunts it to square leg, and I got a guy there, no run. So you go, whoa, got that one out. Thank God for that. And I'm shining the ball on the way back, and I felt this on my forehead. And within 30 seconds, off the ground. We're off for 1 hour. Come back to bowl. Now, I've never clarified this. I've mentioned it to a few journalists. Maybe you guys can check it up. It's got to be the longest debut over in Test cricket history ever. We were off for an hour, and then I got back on and had to bowl the last 5 balls. So the over went for I think an hour and 3 minutes or something. It's got to be the longest debut over in Test cricket history. I had David Gower dropped at first slip as well. by Western Australian opening batsman. Anyway, it burst through his hands. He went off. Next over, I think might have been a maiden. I went for 4 or something. Next over, I get Gower out caught in the gully. I think 3 or 4 overs, 1 for 8. Gower dropped once and then Gower caught in the gully. I'm thinking, how easy is this Test cricket? You find out very quickly. It ain't that easy, let me tell you. And it was a really amazing Test match. And then I played in the last Test as well. And then it became known as Botham's Ashes. And every time Australia goes there, I get asked by journalists, what was it like playing in Botham's Ashes? I mean, I played the last 2 Tests and it's crazy, but it's just got that stigma about it. And also about me getting pulled absolutely out of obscurity to play in those games was amazing.
And you had to wait for further Australian honours, right? Because in 1983, you played one-day cricket, but then it was up until 1987 that you had to wait till you get back into the Australian Test side. So how did you spend those years away from the game? And what were the thoughts that went through your mind? Because ultimately, once you've made an entry into international cricket, you want more and more of it.
Absolutely, you do. You want to play at the highest level against the best players to test yourself, basically. How good are you? Can you get them out? Can you work them out? Are they? Yeah, and to play at that level, it's amazing when you're playing Test cricket. So after 82, 83, 4, I started to have some knee injuries. I actually spent nearly 2 seasons out of the game, had 3 or 4 operations on my left knee. It just wouldn't come right. Then changed a few training things, started talking to a few people and got back for the 85, 86 summer, which we won the Sheffield Shield. And that was a very big win for New South Wales. It was our back-to-back win. We'd won it the year before, but I took 6 for 65 in that Shield final. And I got a lot of confidence back with that performance. The following season, played 1 Test against New Zealand.
Yes, the memorable one.
That was another crazy moment.
You have to tell me more about it because I spoke to Danny Morrison, who played that game a couple of years ago, and his words were, I'm still taking therapy for that game.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about that, because you batted out the last few overs and you took a few wickets, but that comeback is remembered for your contribution with the bat. And the reasons are that 1, it was Australia's first Test series victory under Alan Border's captaincy, and the team was just building up on the back of the 1987 World Cup. So can you tell us about that Melbourne Test, how important it was for Australian cricket and for you personally?
I'm sitting at my mother's place at home with my family, having lunch. And in those days, there was no mobiles. And the home phone rang. And my mother said, and it was Bob Simpson, coach. He'd coached me for New South Wales. I knew Bobby really well. He said, listen, we might have a problem with Bruce Reid and maybe Merv. We're not sure. So can you come down in about 2 hours and play? And we're going to ask Tony Dottermaid also to sort of come and back up, who was a great all-rounder for Victoria. So I raced home, got my gear, said Merry Christmas to the family, got on a plane, flew down to Melbourne, had a session on Christmas afternoon at the MCG. Bruce Reid and both Bruce and Merv were there, and Craig McDermott, myself and Tony Dottermaid as an all-rounder. And the next morning, both Merv and Chook couldn't get themselves up. So I got picked, and Tony Dottermaid sort of slotted in as the third seamer and an all-rounder. As it happened, Dotters took 6 for, I think, and got 50. First time since someone hadn't done that since 1906 or something like that. He had a great game. But look, it was a really closely fought game. It got down to the last day. My mother and my sister were there, and we looked like we were going to win that easily, that they went home at tea and flew back to Sydney. So by the time they get home, I'm out there. So, look, they took the second new ball because John Bracewell had bowled a lot of overs and Richard had just come on to bowl, and he'd already bowled like 25 overs in the day, something like that. So they took the second new ball and got a couple of wickets. Greg Dyer, Peter Sleep, couple of guys, and I'd already packed my bag up. We were flying straight to Perth that night to start a one-day series in a couple of days. So I'm packed. I don't need to bat. Next minute, got the gear on and the pads are out. Next minute, I think Greg Dyer might have been our wicketkeeper who got out, and Alan's standing at the door. We need 36 or something off 5 overs. And Alan's, because they had the Trans-Tasman Cup and we were already 1-0 up. If they win this test, it's a drawn series and they retain the Trans-Tasman Cup, and Alan fails again to win another series, and he's been captain for 2 or 3 years at this stage. And it was hurting him. He wouldn't tell you that, but the older guys like me who were not that much younger, we knew when he was captain grumpy, when he was hurt, when he was good, whatever. So he's standing at the door as I'm walking out, and he goes, just like, so I put my arm around him. I said, "You'll be right, skipper." So out we go. Billy McDermott's out there. We get down to the second last over, which Danny's bowling, and I'm at the non-striker's end. And he bowls this ball, and Craig McDermott's back, and it just goes boom. And there's a very, very large LBW of Pearl. Like Danny was on the ground slapping. They've won the game. And the New South Wales umpire, my old mate Dick French, looked down the wicket like this and went, "Not out." I wanted to say in the middle of the MCG, "Dickie." If you ask any of the Kiwis, they will tell you that the only way it was missing the stumps, it was going to go under the stumps. It was not missing. Anyway, we survived that. So then we celebrate, and to Richard's great credit, he put his arm around me and then he tapped me on the top of the helmet and he said, "Whit, you've done a wonderful thing for Australian cricket today." And I've reminded him about that and how wonderful it was for him to say that. They've just not won the test, and he could have bowled them. He should have bowled them. Me and Craig McDermott there. But he bowled like 30-something overs at that stage in the day. It was fascinating. Then Ian Smith walked over with the ball and he put his arm around and he went, "Widow, you've earned that. Keep that." So I kept the ball. But Richard had taken 5 in the first innings and 5 in the second innings. And years and years and years went by, and I'm sitting next to Sir Richard and Lady Hadley now at this function. And he goes, "That ball from Melbourne." I went, "Yeah." He said, "Have you still got it?" I went, "Yeah." He said, "Out of my 36 fivers, that's the only one that I haven't got." And I went, "Oh." And then I went, "But Ian Smith gave it to me. It's mine." So fast forward to the 2015 World Cup in Australia. There's a big dinner the night before it. And I know one of the guys is organising that. And I told him this story, and I really decided that I wanted to give Richard back the ball. It's a 5 for ball. I'd want that. So I go to this dinner unannounced. Get up, Mark Nicholas invites me up on stage. "Oh, Mike Whitney's here. We're not sure why." I've got it in my pocket of my suit. So I say, "Richard, I need you to come up." And I tell this story, but very briefly. And I said, "And you can have it on permanent loan. It's my ball. Ian Smith gave it to me, but I want you to have it, to have your full collection of 36 fivers at home." And he got a little bit misty, seriously, and he went like this. We've all got cricket balls, Glass. He put it in his fingers like he was going to bowl that outswinger on stage. And I just looked at him. He still says thank you to me. I mean, I'd had that ball for like 28 years or something. And when I see him, we send each other birthday messages and stuff, and he'll say, "The ball's looking good in the cabinet," or something like that. I got letters from politicians and people and emails in New Zealand saying what a wonderful thing you had just done for Trans-Tasman sport, to hand a bloody cricket ball back to someone. So how much power can we have in this thing? I mean, politicians wrote me emails saying, "Michael, you don't know me, but I know you gave the ball back to Richard, and what a beautiful thing that is for sport." Man, just from that moment, and we're still talking about it now. So, and Alan Border won his first series as a Test captain, and he was very, very happy, let me tell you.
And of course, it was so important because Australia won the 1987 World Cup. It was a difficult time that Australian cricket had been through in the 1980s. And then, of course, with this Test series win, the World Cup win, ultimately culminating into the 1989 Ashes series win, where Australian cricket then finally arrived back. I would use the words arrived back into international cricket. So tell us a little bit about that whole phase in the 1980s where Australian cricket was rebuilding under Alan Border, importance of the World Cup, and of course, we had a new list of players. Dean Jones, Craig McDermott, Ian Healy, Steve Waugh, all came around the same time, and you were also a part of that group. So what was that like?
If we talk about Bobby Simpson, he made us all better cricketers. He was a very, very hard man. He was a very hard coach, very disciplined. But all of us would admit, Satch, he made us better players. You had to be. And if you didn't want to be part of that regime, out, and he'd get someone in that wanted to train hard, wanted to do all that. But in saying that, Satch, we did sneak out a few times behind his back and he never found out. But look, cricket went through an interesting period. You know, Kim Hughes resigned. Everybody was shocked. Alan was given that. And I really don't think Alan wanted to be the captain. So he struggled a bit. They went to New Zealand in 85, 6, I think, and Bobby Simpson was coaching us. They took Bob away and put him on that tour as an observer. That was when they decided he was going to coach the side. So I can say this now. Look, he actually found a few players that he didn't think were doing the best for their country. Got some younger guys in, and that was, you know, Booney had already been hanging around with me in first-class cricket since 1980. So he'd had a bit of experience. But Dino, the War twins, well, Mark was a little bit later, Heels, Merv, Billy McDermott, and Alan was also captain of Queensland at that time, nurturing, you know, the Craig McDermotts and these Queensland players as well. So me blocking out in 87, you don't realise the significance of me just blocking out a few overs. But for him to win that series was really, really important. I knew that we good on you, but I realised now for him in his heart and what he wanted to do was really important. So win the World Cup as well, which of course I really wanted to be a part of, but never made the cut. And to win it in the subcontinent, man, that was huge. And it really inspired a lot of cricketers here to go, I want to jump on this train and be with AB and Swampy and Booney and Stephen and Heels and Merv and Billy McDermott and all the other fringe players hanging around were very, very keen. And that pretty much, all that hard work in those years culminated or started the ignition in 89 when they went to England. 89's a disappointing thing for me to talk about because the 88-89 season was one of my better years in first-class cricket. I was the leading wicket taker in Australia. I'd played one test against the West Indies, the last test at Adelaide, took 7 for on a really flat Adelaide batting belter, which was another huge triumph for me. And the leading wicket taker in Australia had never been left out of an Ashes squad ever.
What was it like bowling to the likes of Viv Richards, Gordon Greenidge, Desmond Haynes, and, you know, the list goes on? What was that contest like? And of course, you spoke about the Adelaide test where you got those wickets. As a bowler, what was the kind of satisfaction you got in terms of getting the better of some of these guys?
It was uncomfortable bowling to them because they were the kings at the time. They had been for, 10 or 15 years prior to that. They still had great fast bowlers. Look, I played against some of the West Indies in England in the early 80s. It was scary, man. They were not only quick, but all those top bowlers, Colin Croft, Mikey, not Gordon Greenidge, Malcolm Marshall, Andy Roberts, Wayne Daniel. They were skillful as well. They weren't just out and out, bore in and bowl 90 miles an hour. Very skillful. And of course, you fight off the first two for an hour. it hit a few times, and then they have a rest, and the other two come back on, and away you go again. And it was very hard cricket then, because they'd only bowl maybe 80 overs in a day, and they would set a similar field that what we saw at Lords when England bowl bounces for 3 hours. If you hook them, if you can, it's a risk. You might be able to bunt a single. So in those days, a lot of the scores were 70 or 80 overs of slow cricket, 200 runs in a day. So then they said, you have to bowl so many overs in a day. You can only have one over the shoulder. Now it's two, to try and get that out of the game. So it was an amazing time to play. Gordon and Desi Haynes opening the batting. If you pitched it up first ball, they're driving you. If you drop it short first ball, they're pulling you or hooking you. If you're short outside the off stump, they're leaning back and cutting you for 4. And you might get lucky and get one of them out. Then Viv walks out. And then in those days, it was Richie Richardson and then Viv, who, if you overpitch, and I'm talking about margins that aren't that great. If you're just out of the box, they're leaning back and punching you. And when you played against guys like Viv and Richie, all those guys, I think now, how would they go with the bats that they're using today? I mean, Viv used to hit them out of the ground with the toothpicks that they were using in those days. I mean, these guys were phenomenal. So look, that test match in Adelaide, that was the 5th test. I think the selectors are actually trying to get rid of me. I think they'd had enough of me knocking on the door, and we'll pick him for Adelaide against this great West Indian side, and they'll belt him all around the ground, or we have none for 150, and then we won't have to worry about Mike Whitney anymore, and he's 30. So I went down there, take 7 for 89 off 30 overs in the first, and got the ball swinging Irish, just really, really reverse swinging, and took another 2 in the second innings. And I didn't think about that game much, but I actually looked it up not that long ago and realised that we only took 14 wickets in that test match. One of them was a run out. I took 9, Tim May took 2, and Trevor Hons took 2. So McDermott and Hughes didn't get a wicket. I took 9, and the 2 spinners took 2 each, and there was 1 run out. So when I looked at that, I thought, wow, man, that was a really big game for you to do that on Adelaide Oval against one of the greatest. I mean, their lineup was Haynes, Greenidge, Richardson, Richards, Hooper, Logie, Dujon. That was their top 7. And then the quicks after that.
I think it's the same game where Merv Hughes got that 70, you said, and Don Bradman walked into the West Indian dressing room, and one of the fast bowlers said, I could knock you over. And he said, how can you knock me over when you can't get Merv Hughes out? Is that the same game?
We were in the dressing room, and the Don was in our dressing room, and Dean was trying to saddle the Don in to talk about his 200 to Donald. It was hilarious. And then Clive Lloyd, who was managing the West Indies, come in and said, Sir Donald, would you come down and be introduced to our team? And Sir Donald went down there 5 minutes later. But Dean went straight after him with a 6-pack. Merv straight after that, because Dean's going to tell him how good his 200 was, and Merv's going to tell him about the 72. So by the time we all get in there, Viv is introduced, and he gets to Patrick. Patrick stands up, and Patrick just had the jock strap on. With this is with respect, phenomenal physique, like just 6'5" and just cut. And Sir Donald was only like 5'9" or 8. So this huge West Indian stood up, towering over Sir Donald, and Patrick said something to the point of, I think if we were playing today, said Donald, that I could bowl you out. And the Don sort of leant back and went, I don't know about that, Sonny. You couldn't get Merv Hughes out today. So the whole dressing room just exploded in laughter, and it was really, and Patrick sat down and thought, made a bit of a mistake there. I don't know. So we enjoyed that dressing room. It was hilarious, but that's a true story. Yeah. There was a few other words within that conversation, which I can't say, but it was pretty funny, let me tell you. Yeah.
Of course. And, a few years later, when India were in town in Australia, and you had the opportunity to come back into Test cricket and bowl that spell at Perth. Quick wicket, not the Perth that we got to know in the years after, still a very quick wicket. Tendulkar gets 100, and, in spite of the 100s, that's still one of those that is remembered even now as one of his finest. But you were the player of the match in that game, got 7 wickets, also a spell to remember. What do you make of that game and compare it with something like your performance against the West Indies?
I was around the team a lot, and I knew that I was going to be part of that series. So I played in the first test and I actually knocked Sachin over in the first innings. And then again, you don't think of this. Years later, a journalist rings you up and goes, "Do you realise you're the first bowler in a test match in Australia to bowl out Sachin Tendulkar?" I go, "No, I don't, you don't even think about that." So it's crazy. And look, Sach was only 19 then. He just had, and it just needed to be worked on. And we just knew, and he was really competitive. And it was fascinating when I think about what he did during that game. So Adelaide, we were 3-0 up, I think. We'd won 3 in a draw. We fought very hard in Sydney. Ravi Shastri got 200 there. Sachin got 148.
Yes.
We fought very, very, very hard there. But we get to Perth, and look, I think with all due respect to the Indian boys, they'd had a very tough summer. The World Cup as well was coming, and it was very, very tough. And they had some young players in there who were still finding their way, good cricketers. But we get to Perth, and I was just in this rhythmical. You just know when you got it right. You're in a bit of a zone. And I think in the first innings I took 4 for and was bowling well and bowled Sachin out with that 100. Pretty happy to have my name next to that 100 too, let me tell you. And it got to the second innings, and Craig McDermott and Merv bowled an unbelievable opening spell to Chris Srikanth, and who would have opened at the other end?
Ravi Shastri itself, I think.
I don't think Ravi opened in Sikh. He was a Sikh, opened the batting.
Navjot Singh Sidhu.
Navjot Singh Sidhu opened the batting, I'm pretty sure, in that game. And I think Ravi batted down the order because he had
Sidhu opened
a hammy. He was covering from a hammy that he hurt in Sydney. He hurt his hamstring. So they bowled an unbelievable opening spell to both those guys, Navjot and Chris Srikanth. They played and missed. I mean, and it was doing a little bit with the new ball and still had a little bit of carry. Then I come on. Look, Glenn McGrath, Dennis Lillee, Richard Hadley, Beefy Botham, Sachin, Kapil Dev, Azhar, they've all had a lot of these days. I only had a couple, and this was one of them. In that game where I was the man of the match, you're not going to believe who the 12th men were. The 12th man on our side was Shane, and the 12th man for the Indians was Saurav Ganguly, who went on to be Captain India, one of the greatest players of all time, a legend from Calcutta, and Shane, one of the greatest of all time, bringing the drinks out in the game that I was man of the match. How bizarre. Unbelievable. But it was a great time. And then the World Cup came, of course, and it was on for young and old with everybody coming to Australia.
And you got a chance to be a part of that World Cup squad, having missed out in 1987, defending a title in front of your home crowd. How big was that, and how geared up were you for that opportunity? Because it was your first World Cup after all.
I set a goal as coming into the 90s that if I could do this and then be playing against India and be involved in that, you've got to be a chance to roll straight into the squad. And after my performances, I think I played 3 tests and took 17 wickets at 19 or something like that, and had played some one-day cricket for New South Wales and Australia. My one-day bowling was getting better, much better. And I got picked. And again, I was 33 then. I'd been hanging around for 13 seasons, and it was, to me, good on you, mate. You know, you've done all this hard work and the knee operations and all this sort of stuff. And finally, some reward was coming at the end. So to have it in your home country, yeah, look, a lot of pressure. If you ask me honestly now, I think if you asked anybody, Alan, we'd all say our preparation was a little bit short. Coming out of that test series, we didn't really have enough time to click back into one-day gear. And our first game was in Auckland against New Zealand, and we lost. And Martin Crowe played an unbelievable, and he scored a great 100. But we lost that game, and it sort of felt like the balloon was full there. We hadn't had to, and we lost a little bit of air out of it. So, man, we lost against Pakistan. We got beat by South Africa. We just lost too many games at crucial times and weren't really in the money at the end of the tournament, which was very disappointing in front of your home crowd. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the games that Australia actually won was against India, and it was a World Cup classic because in 1987 at Chennai, Australia had beaten India by 1 run. Now come to 1992, and the same thing happens, this time at Brisbane at the Gabba, and this is the old Gabba. It isn't the new Gabba. And Australia scored 238. It's a rain affected game. So what was that
I think
game
Dino, but yeah, we were rain affected and we thought we had enough.
And of course,
and then
tell us about that, because Azharuddin and Manjrekar get India back into the game. And after a long summer where you've sparred against each other a lot.
Off pretty much 100 balls. It was almost a run a ball. And that's probably one of his better innings that summer. That was the Azhar that everybody had been waiting to see, the really laconic driving, and he played beautifully. Who else did you say got runs?
Manjrekar got 40.
Sanjay Manjrekar got a few. Did Manoj Prabhakar get a couple at the end too? Anyway, look, it gets down. The thing I remember about the game is this. I think we had 1 or 2 run-outs in our innings, but there was 3 or 4 run-outs in the Indian innings. And the last wicket was because, let me see if I can remember. Yeah, Javagal Trinath was in with Venkatapati Raju. What a legend. I love him. And they needed, I think, 2 off the last ball, maybe. And I remember Javagal's gone, and hit it into the outfield. Steve Waugh was running around and he dropped the catch. And I thought, next minute he scooped it up and thrown it in, and there's a run out and we've won the game. So I went from absolute disappointment that Stephen never drops a catch and he's out in the outfield, he's dropped it, to we won. Oh, wow. It was just amazing. I think that was maybe the 4th run out in their innings. Something like that. Really weird. But we were very happy to win that game. And I know the Indian boys were very disappointed, let me tell you.
Yeah, you were right. That was the 4th run out. And Manoj Prabhakar, Venkatapati Raju, they were there at the end. Javagal Srinath was the one who finished not out in that game. And I think the last ball, India needed around 4 to win.
Oh, is that right? So he needed a boundary. But Stephen dropped the catch anyway, and they were trying to run it and got run it. If I had to drop the catch like that on the boundary, I would have gone, oh. But no, Stephen drops the catch. It bounces up. In the click, the Waugh twins are wired differently. In the blink of an eye, he's picked it up on the bounce and just gone. And I think, did Tom Moody, or was it Heels that run out? Because Tom Moody, I think, was bowling that last over. What a weird game to win it like that. Crazy. Very exciting, but we were very happy, as I said. Indian dressing room, very quiet.
Yeah, and again, it was at the end of a long summer, many contests.
Long summer.
You bowled quite an economical spell, and in fact, through the World Cup, you were Australia's most successful bowler. Yes, Australia didn't make it through to the next round, but personally, it would have still been a sort of a vindication that, hey, you know what? I missed out the last World Cup, having put in all these years. I've played one, and I've done something that I can be happy with.
To me, one-day cricket really wasn't about taking wickets. I used to focus on if I could bowl my 10 overs to 30 runs. And if we all did that, they're only going to get 150. But if I can bowl mine for 30, that means that someone can go for 45, and then it's going to even all out. So the wicket taking for me, and if I remember that game, I don't think I took a wicket against India in that. But I think I had 10 overs, none for 34 or 35 or 36. So that was around where I wanted to be,
None for 36 with 2 maidens, actually.
How insane's our memories. But I was the leading wicket taker of Australia and the most economical bowler in the World Cup. And again, that was a real triumph for me personally. I mean, you don't go out and bark that out, but for me in my head at 33 years of age, and I just tried so hard. And at that stage, I'd had 8 knee operations. I'd had
Whoa.
5 on my left knee and 3 on my right. I ended up having 9 knee operations, and I've just a year ago had full knee replacements, which has been a long year. But if you said to me, would I do it all over again? Tomorrow. I'd do it all over again tomorrow. Absolutely, tomorrow, without question.
What you just said about your knee injuries, of course, that is not something that would have been very well publicized. Of course, we were in the day and age where social media wasn't around at the time. So how did you deal with that phase where you repeatedly went under the knife and yet continued to bowl and back your strengths? Because it's very simple to say, but of course, you're the one who's done it.
Yeah, look, I think my family, I lost my dad when I was 16. My sister was 18, but my mum was just an amazing mother and very supportive and just always there and always from the background she come from, a pretty poor background, never give in, always stand up for yourself, don't back down. So I had a lot of belief in myself that, and look, a lot of people said after a couple of knee operations, you won't play again. Well, that's all they had to say. I won't play again, will I? Well, just watch this. So every time people told me that I wasn't going to be able to do it, your knees are too bad, well, I'd just up the ante, train harder. And in those days, even though I'd done an apprenticeship at Qantas as a ground engineer, it was really hard to find jobs that would fit in with the training regime, the rehabilitation, playing cricket and having a job. It was really difficult in those days to find a job. But somehow, I worked on building sites, labouring, I drove trucks. I couldn't go back to Qantas and work as an engineer because they wanted you there full time every day, and I wanted to go and play cricket. So there was a couple of years in there which were long, but I also took the time to go and do a bit of travelling. I went to Europe. I did a Kentucky tour, travelled around Asia, went to India for the first time backpacking in 1984 during the knee operations. And India in 1984 was a vastly different place to what it is in 2023. And I was backpacking, and I ended up going up to Kashmir, walked up the Kollahoy Glacier, went to Pahalgam up there in Kashmir, just so beautiful in the mountains. But travelled all over India, and it felt like I'd landed on another planet. I could not believe the amount of people, the smells, every sense, eyes, hearing, taste. And that started my fascination with India. And I'm happy to say I've been back to India 20 times now, traveling, doing a bit of work.
A year after the World Cup, you finished your international career and then moved into presenting. How did that happen? Did you move away because of your knee problems and ultimately it was like the right time to go? And how did you ultimately end up facing the camera and doing a pretty good job of it? Because here you were during your knee operations and struggles that you were working on site and avoiding a job with Qantas because it didn't allow you to train. And then suddenly, what am I going to do after cricket?
It's a really, really good question, because when you retire at my stage, we didn't have a lot of savings in the bank. You had to go and do something. So I was doing a bit of after dinner speaking and things like that. And I didn't really want to go back to Qantas and get in overalls and cruise undercarriages again. I'd sort of moved on a bit from that. So out of the blue, I got this phone call from this fella and said he's seen me speak at this cricket function, thought I was fantastic. I'm making a 13 episode series for the ABC called Great Ideas. It was about innovation and invention in Australia. And I think you can host the show. And I thought it was a G-up. I thought the bloke was joking.
Just
and
like
he said,
your
I'll
test
meet
debut.
you. Same thing. Anyway, I met the guy that day. Next minute, I'm doing this show. What happened was, but one of the guys I worked with on that show, who directed and produced a lot of my stuff, I ended working with on Who Dares Wins. And that was the first time that he'd seen me and I'd seen him, and we really got together. And he always said, you had a glint in your eye, Michael, and I knew that you could do these other shows. Anyway, I did that stuff for the ABC. Didn't really think too much about TV. Got another phone call from a bloke who I'd played cricket against and who was now heading up Channel 7 in Sydney. And I went to see him. He said, we've got this show called Sydney. He said, do you want to do sport? I went, no. Every ex-sportsman retires, they do sport. I'm an ex-sportsman. I want to do entertainment. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, like that. And he laughed. And he said, well, we've got this show called Sydney Weekender. We've only made like a dozen episodes and it's a travel show around New South Wales. Would you like to learn the ropes on that? I went, yes. I did that show for the next 27 years. I loved it. But very quickly after I started at Channel 7, I did Who Dares Wins and was the referee in Gladiators. And that was right at the cusp of that style of TV. It was right on the cusp. And I think about it now, there's so many shows that have spawned from Gladiators and Who Dares Wins. The term reality TV show didn't exist. We were called entertainment shows, but very quickly it changed into reality. And it's 50% of what we watch now. And some of it's not that good. But when I think about being at the start of that and doing Who Dares Wins, and as you probably know, I went to India and made some Who Dares Wins in India as well for AXN. And we called one show AXN Who Dares Wins and the other one Extreme Dhamaka. That was the second one we went, which is like a big fireworks explosion, isn't it? Extreme Dhamaka, like the celebration. So that was amazing. But look, my staple was this Sydney Weekender.
What do you think helped you in your presenting career? What was that one thing that helped you transition and make a long, long journey out of it?
I was very fortunate when I started at Channel 7 that we started to do some reading of scripts that were on the screen. It's very different now. They used to have a person that turned the paper script like this and you had to read it. And the way that was written was not written in the way that I speak. I'm a gunner, shoulda, coulda, wanta, yes, this, And I found when I wasn't a word in my vocab, I'd just stick on it. So then I spoke to my producer about it and he said, don't worry about doing that and you just be yourself. So they never really had to, look, when you're presenting, you're in a sort of elevated performance mode, but it was always me. They never tried to change me and make me into someone else like, oh, that's him on camera. But when I met him the other day, he's not like that. He's a different person. It was me. And I started to realize that was the good way to go because people would meet me and they'd go, you're exactly the same as you are on television. So that's what I wanted to. I didn't want to have this separation of the two people, except for the performance. Here I am, and look how unbelievable this is. And that was the biggest thing that they allowed me to do, just be Mike Whitney and be myself and not try to be anybody else. And it was great.
Recently, I saw one of your videos where you said the Mike Whitney radio has been on for a long time. You just want to turn it down.
Loud.
Yeah, it's been loud. You just want to turn it down a little bit. And you've obviously taken a bit of a retirement from your presenting. But what was the thought behind it? Because, just now you said that when people meet you, they say, oh, you know what? He's just the same the way he is on TV. In fact, it's the first time I'm getting to talk to you one-on-one and I can feel that same energy. And you still are as energetic as I saw you the first time. I think I saw you for the first time in that AXN show and later at the ICL. So you still have the same energy. So what was the thought behind walking away for a bit?
Really, it was my knee operations. I spoke to the network. I'd been there 27 years. My knees were that bad that I was actually struggling to go out with the crew. And if they said to me, look, you need to fly 3 hours and then spend a day in a national park and go to 3 different locations where you can only walk, I couldn't do that anymore. So I said to them, look, I need to have a year off. And they just don't give you a year off when you're working for a network. So I finished my 27th year on the 31st of December 2 years ago, and then prepared for the next 4 months everyday training for my knee operations. And this is really weird. This is the synergy in my life. Today is the 1 year anniversary, right at this moment, of my double knee replacement surgery.
Oh.
So you've got me on the 1 year anniversary. So I had to leave to get that done. And I'm nearly 65. I'm 65 next February. And I'm really satisfied. I mean, I'm really happy, Nishad, with the cricket. You always wanted to play more Test cricket and more one day, go on more tours. But when I think about it, I never thought I was going to do that as a kid. And the people I played with and against, and then the TV for nearly 3 decades. Very, very satisfied, mate, and happy. If not one person ever came up again and went, "Oh, Mike, mate, I'm good. You know, I'm really good." It's been a wonderful, wonderful journey.
Mike, it's been a really great chat. It's been really great to go back in time, relive all those stories, and of course, get a perspective from you on your career and of course what was beyond the field of play as well. And to sum up, if you could just sum up your journey in one line, that would be really great. And then we'll just end this fascinating conversation.
I don't think I could do it in one line, Nishad. It's just been, like I said earlier, I'm reflecting back on a lot of things at the moment, and I dead set sit back sometimes and go, "Oh man, remember that? Like, wow, did that really happen? Or did you?" People ask me, did I meet the Don? And that in the dressing room, I spoke to him, but I met the Don 8 times and sat down with him a couple of times. I wanted to pinch him to make sure he was a human because I'd read about him and I'd played against Viv and these guys that average 50. They just to be in that guy's presence. Very fortunate, enjoyed every moment. Luckiest human being on planet Earth, I think. I've just had a great time, mate. Met so many wonderful people. And it's all because of that. All because of that. And the game that we love so much. Love. The game means everything to me. It's given me my life. And I'll always respect it for that.
And thank you so much for joining us and telling us. It is that love for cricket that brings us all together. And it's been fantastic to have you on the show and to relive all those memories.
Thanks very much. It's been my pleasure.